What is this place?
Actually, Jazz was talking about his hair earlier.
I need a haircut. I need a haircut bad.
Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Casual Discussions with the boys. We're in a bit of a side mission today, a bit of a bonus episode, if you want to call that. We've actually finished the Infinity Saga, and we are about to venture into Phase 4, but we just got to get that fantasy draft out of the way to really review and recap Phase 3. So we're keen to get that episode out soon. But for now, we are exploring, I guess, the outskirts of the MCU, where Marvel kind of began, in a sense, in the movie realm, in the big cinema movie realm. And today, if you couldn't see in the title, we are looking at the first X-Men movie, which released in 2000. A super classic. I guess it's weird to say that it's a classic now, but it was 20 years ago. So it is weird to say. Wild. Yeah, but with the establishment of the MCU now, which is essentially Marvel now, this is the one, kind of the stepping point of where I guess the superhero genre kind of was back in the picture, but it was a long, messy road up until towards the what we now know as the MCU. But anyways, I think we're going to jump into our segments for this one, and they're a bit different, a bit of a change up this time round, as opposed to our usual segments in the Infinity Saga. We'll take them as we go. And the first one I've dubbed the Film of Future Past, reference to rocky, X-Men Days of Future Past, where they go back in time
to slip between past and future.
To, I guess, the past to fix stuff in the future. In this
that's a great plot description. Yeah, brilliant.
In this sense, I guess the question I'm asking in this segment is whether or not you can easily go back to this movie. Is it rewatchable for you? And I think I'll start off with David for this one.
Yeah, I would definitely say this is definitely a rewatchable. I've seen this quite a few times over the years. And funnily enough, there are actually a few X-Men movies that I've actually gone back, even the more recent ones, that I actually feel are outdated. They don't have the same, I don't know, they just feel very over their time. But I feel like this one, even though, yes, it's obviously of its time, it's still a lot of its messages and its plot points and the way the characters interact have still stay relevant to today. And yeah, and I think that's also very relevant to the casting and the dialogue and the themes that it brings through in the film. So yeah, I definitely think this one, it still holds up to this day.
Would you say, like, back in 2000, were these castings, were they renowned actors again, or was it a bit of a Marvel thing where they were getting relatively unknown people?
From what I understood, casting Hugh Jackman was a very big move. As in, like, actually, to me, I think I can imagine Wolverine didn't happen, and then, Hugh Jackman's career was like The Greatest Showman, and then they're like, we're casting this guy as Wolverine. Like, it's just too different. It's like, we can't see this guy as Wolverine. And so I think it was because he just came off, like, I think, like a production of The Boy from Oz, where, it was he played very into flamboyant type roles, and they're like, you're going to play like the hardest dude on the planet. It's like, oh wow. So that was very left field. But actually, I'm pretty sure a lot of the, like, obviously the internet wasn't as big back then, so that, it wouldn't have been as big as today, but there was a bit of an outroar. It's like, this isn't Wolverine. Wolverine's supposed to be short, and it was very like that. But you could get away with it more back then.
A whole foot shorter, yeah.
I think the other roles, like, I think Femke Janssen was pretty big, was getting big around that time. I think I don't know. I think they were up and coming roles at that time, but at the same time, that, like, you have Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen who had a very big. So I think it was more played into, you bring in your new actors, but you have the
seasoned
ones to, like, make you feel like, okay, if this goes wrong. So that makes sense. Yeah.
There was a bit of a mix, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering because, Hugh Jackman, it's hard to move forward now. It's like Iron Man, Robert Downey, but Hugh Jackman was first, so it's hard to see them as anyone else at times.
Yeah.
But that's not to say like their career hasn't gone anywhere, but like just it's just that they pulled off the role so well, and to choose someone who again was left field, it was a pretty good thing. And Marvel's done it time and again with the MCU has done it time and again with their casting in these future movies. So yeah. All right, Jens, what about you? The rewatchability of this movie.
Yeah, interesting question about Hugh Jackman. I've got that down to talk about later. I was thinking about it too. I wonder if you asked a like 12 to 14-year-old girl if they knew Hugh Jackman, what would they know him from? If it would be from Wolverine or The Greatest Showman, I'd probably say it's from The Greatest Showman.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when was the last time? When did Logan come out? That was what year was that?
2018.
2018.
Yeah.
So it's
2017, 2018.
It's been like nearly 5 years since he was Wolverine. So interesting to see. He has sort of began to make a career of himself after it in a way. But yeah, anyway, rewatchability. So bit of backstory. I obviously love X-Men. I didn't grow up watching X-Men as a kid or anything like that. I didn't read comics from X-Men or anything like that. First Class, X-Men First Class, 2011. Is that when that came out? About 2011, something like that. I can't remember. That probably got me into X-Men. And so at that point in 2011, I went back and rewatched all the original X-Men. So I didn't see this movie until like 2011 or 2010 anyway.
Right.
But I loved it. And so when I watched it first, I loved it. I've got some really strong feelings towards X2, which we'll get to when we review that. But I mean, from this movie, like I love it. And I think it definitely, to me, this is controversial, I guess, but to me, this is more important to the superhero genre than what Spider-Man 1 is with Tobey Maguire.
I don't think that's controversial.
It is.
Some people love that Spider-Man movie, man. And it's like for them, they always argue how that's like one of the best superhero movies of all time, and Spider-Man 2 and what that did for, I think what it did for introducing big budget superhero movies. But I mean, to me, it's like me and Zeta were talking about this before you got on, Fitz, and it's like, would we have gotten, sort of team up movies like the Avengers and Infinity War and Endgame and stuff without having a movie like X-Men that does in some way bring a lot of characters onto screen that have powers. And in this sense, they all kind of, they work together quite, harmoniously without much tension between each other. I mean, you get the off character that we'll get to that's just terrible. But overall, I think this movie works with the big characters with their big powers and they work together. So yeah, rewatchability for me, like I would, if I was in a room, and this is kind of how I judge this question on, if I walked into someone's house and they does anyone even have, people have DVD collections. I don't even have a DVD player anymore. But if someone had a Netflix or Disney Plus or a DVD and said, hey, we're going to put on X-Men 1, are you happy to watch that? Like my answer 100% would be yes. So to me, that means like I would be able to rewatch it very easily. Yeah.
Actually, on that point, I read something that in regards to, I think it did well in the box office, but in regards to DVD, VHS sales, this is actually like in the top 10, I think.
Really?
I think it's like 6th or 7th or something, apparently. I read that somewhere. So that's why I was like wondering, I swear I always find this movie in anyone's house, like on DVD or whatever.
Going off your Spider-Man point, like not all the lines in this movie are perfect, but you go back and watch the first Spider-Man and there's the part where she says, who are you or something like that. And he's like, oh yeah, you know who I am. And he goes, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And then just like, goes on. There's nothing like that in this movie. So
there's one really terrible line, but there's only
not
one.
Like that. Like your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Do you know which one? Do you know the one I'm referring to?
The Toad line.
Yes.
Yeah, we all know
that
the Toad
is
line.
that. Do you know? Apparently, I mean, I'll get to it when we talk about fun facts.
It.
Anyway, yeah, it's all good. Just keep going.
I actually, on that as well, just the Spider-Man versus X-Men, like which one was the kicking off point for Marvel? I do also have a hard time picking between the two because when I think back, obviously this was first, like it came out first, and Wolverine, if I think of like my first Marvel superhero that like I got into, but I wasn't too aware of Marvel yet, Wolverine will definitely be up there, but because he's part of the X-Men, I think of the X-Men. Whereas Spider-Man, again, it's his own thing. I feel like maybe Spider-Man was the more exciting one at the time, like the cinema experience. But like that's controversial as well to say. So I have a hard time deciding which. But in regards to rewatchability, long story short, yeah, this is easy rewatch for me. I like rediscovering certain things about this movie, like the deeper dialogue, the deeper social commentary. It's really good. It may not have the best. I mean, it has aged a little bit. You got the techno, you got the
the techno never gets old.
the old school CGI. But like, I don't know. I still have a good time when I see this movie. I mean, I don't know if it appeals to like younger kids. I think it's a bit more mature in comparison to Spider-Man or the Marvel movies we get now. But if anything, it does. For me, it's an easy rewatch for sure. All right, we'll get to the next part. The Deadpools. Bit of a reference to Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool, obviously. How in X-Men Origins,
it's me.
it was like
Don't scratch.
the worst portrayal.
Just cleaning
of-
up the timeline.
Not necessarily Wade Wilson, but of Deadpool or Weapon X. I can't remember.
Weapon X.
Yeah, and then that's evolved now into his Deadpool franchise, which is picked up quite well. So in this, we're talking about standout characters, whether they stand out in a really good way or they stand out in a really bad way.
Yeah, I mean, I won't try and take all of the characters and mention all of them because you guys probably want to fill in on some stuff, but I'll just throw some out there off the top of my head. Obviously, like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, to me, obviously as Professor X and Magneto. Magneto is probably, and this is probably more with Michael Fassbender's portrayal in the later movies, but Magneto became and probably still is my top villain of any movie, any genre, anything ever. So when I went back and watched these movies, I was really nervous that I was going to not like him being old because I'd only seen him as Michael Fassbender. Then I went back and watched these movies and I was like, oh, am I going to like this or not? I don't really know. But them two, and specifically their relationship and their connection as far as the brotherhood of them as actors off screen, I think really brings something special to this movie and then to the franchise. And I think them two together are just really, really incredible. I'll let you guys probably talk more about Wolverine and what Hugh Jackman did to the role, because to me, he was a standout. And I imagine if you went and watched this movie in 2000 and you were like a kid or a teenager or whatever it was, and you came out of here, if you didn't want to be Hugh Jackman or be Wolverine, there's probably something wrong with you. Like if you went and watched this movie, like he was just the best. Yeah. Maybe some bad characters for me that I just didn't really enjoy that much. Most people that know me, know my feelings on Cyclops. I don't hate Cyclops as a character. If you read the comics, I actually think Cyclops is really cool. And I used to not like to be quoted on that because I used to hate Cyclops. But in the X-Men cartoon, like I actually think Cyclops is fine. I have no problems with him. I think that persona of him being kind of this like Dudley Do-Right type character is kind of fitting for who he is. I don't think James Marsden to me does a good job. I don't think he brings anything to the character that I really enjoy. In the later movies, I think maybe he gets a little bit better because there's more of the pull and tug between him and Wolverine. But in this movie, I'm just kind of like, I hate you. Like, please don't be in this movie. Like you look corny. You look like everything is bad. So I don't like that at all. And then obviously me and Zeta talked about this off screen too. I think Sabretooth was really done dirty in this movie. Like he could be a bear and it would be no difference to the movie. like if Magneto was like, hey, like don't do this, my pet bear is gonna eat you, it would be no different. Like he could have just been a bear. Whereas like to me, I'm like Sabretooth actually is a cool character in the comics and he should have had more justice in this movie rather than getting John Howard's eyebrow stuck to his face, which was a bit of a disservice.
It was of the time.
Anyway, it was probably that time. Maybe Hugh Jackman. Maybe Hugh Jackman was the influence on that. He's like, oh, I got this prime minister, and he's really good. So, that's kind of my overview of the Deadpools, of the good and bad characters. So,
nice. All right, I'll go. Actually, on the Cyclops and Wolverine, I didn't mind their back and forth in this movie, like just because of the contrast between their characters. Like James Marsden's Cyclops was a square, like 100%. Like he was the one who ends up taking the lead after Charles is incapacitated. So I thought it was well enough for that. I mean, I'd say they did him worse in the future movies because they gave him like 1.5 lines in each. So, you know, but then again, he wasn't the most.
Maybe that's why I preferred
it. Admittedly, he's not the most appealing, and yeah, Hugh Jackman 100% is. I actually feel like we covered him pretty well, and he wasn't really the standout character I wanted to talk about. I was going to talk about Magneto and Professor X, but you covered that pretty well. Actually, Patrick Stewart was actually, this was going to be my trivia bit, but like, or my fun fact, but like, he was the first to be cast as a mutant, and it was actually somewhat of a fan casting without the internet. Like, people just wanted Patrick Stewart to be Professor X, so that worked out well. Whereas Ian McKellen wasn't down for it until he saw the costume. The costume is actually what drew him into taking on the role of Magneto. And look, if anything between those two, the chemistry, the dynamics between them is awesome. I like the references to chess they have in this movie.
I have read the first move.
Just like the battle of the minds.
That is all I know.
Is really good. Like, even though Professor X is the one that reads minds, Magneto always seems to be like a step ahead in his planning and whatnot, and his whole scheming. But I guess the one standout character I want to talk about is Mystique. This version of Mystique I actually like more than Jennifer Lawrence's one.
Yeah, agree.
The espionage aspect is pulled off really well. Like, and I think I'd say the side characters, not all the side characters, Sabretooth put to the side. But as far as side characters go, I think Mystique is like actually a strong side character throughout all these X-Men movies. Like the early X-Men movies. And I think, Rebecca Romijn, I think that's her name. Her Mystique is really good in regards to that espionage and whatnot, and just, causing chaos behind the scenes. I feel like, I don't know, I'm not sure if that's how the cartoon version is, but in this, I feel like she pulled it off well. She's a bit of an underrated character to me, but she's one that I feel like stands out in a sense. Any others? Not really. I think in regards to like Rogue, the accent, like she went for that southern accent she had in the cartoon, right? It was a bit, I don't know. It wasn't the best. I don't know why I always talk about accents, but
well, it doesn't really make sense. So, okay, I know this is going to sound like real, like profiling, I guess, but in the opening scene that we get with her kissing that guy, there's no reason to suggest that was in the south of the US. Like, it could, like, so there isn't anything that she has to have that accent. So, as in, if we don't think that it was pulled off well, or the directors didn't think it was pulled off well, they didn't need to do that. Like, it's not like I just don't know that people would feel strongly about Rogue's accent like they would if someone like Colossus didn't have a Russian accent or something like that. In, there's certain characters that represent certain things to certain nations specifically, especially in X-Men, because they try to like diverse themselves quite a fair bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Rogue's southern accent, if that was taken away, whereas like there'd be someone in Mississippi that's like up in arms about the fact that Rogue's accent was taken away. Like, I just don't know that.
So that scene when like she kisses the boyfriend and the parents come in all shocked, it really should have been like Matthew McConaughey being like, "I'm going to get my shotgun."
It should have been that scene out of Monsters Inc. when Randall goes into the trailer park and they get the when they're in that. Yeah, that's what it should have been.
That should have been.
Can I ask a quick question before we maybe go to Fitz for his characters? Talking about Cyclops, and you were like, he's kind of like, he is what he is. Did you guys like Ty Sheridan's, like what that was beginning to become with the newer movies?
No.
Okay.
But I had, because I like Ty Sheridan as an actor from like, Mud and so on. It's not so much Ty Sheridan himself. It's they didn't really set him up to be Cyclops, really. Like, he didn't, like, you see him in the comics and in the show, he's got the full suit, the full get up. He's full leader. He just was pretty much, he was playing the same thing as James Marsden, only this time he was a teenager who I don't think he was really given much to do.
Actually, I agree with you there. It looked like, even though Days of Future Past was meant to be like a move towards a new direction, it looked like they just casted a younger James Marsden. He just become the same thing.
To me, I'm like, it's one of the things I'm nervous about the MCU bringing the X-Men in. And I'm not nervous because I know they're going to do it well, but I think that, like, to me, someone like that, which is traditionally all across the X-Men movies been quite underdone. Like, fans of Cyclops are real upset in general about him as a character not being portrayed properly. Whereas I think if they're going to do a TV show, I really think they're going to pick a character like a Cyclops to focus on, to bring us into, because if we want him to be the leader, it needs to be the first. It's like why Iron Man is so important to the Avengers, right? Because then there's something about starting it off with that strong foot about being like, this is the person we want to introduce this universe to with the audience. So it's like, as much as I could, see them doing as like an unknown, mutant character, they could definitely do a story about Cyclops as a TV show on Disney Plus, which would lead you into a potential movie, which I think would be interesting. So,
but like, going off that, I feel like what's killed Cyclops in all these movies is, like, Wolverine was a breakout character, and I think if Wolverine wasn't such a success, he wouldn't have been such a big deal in all the movies, and that kind of sidelined Cyclops. And then in the new ones, it's kind of like, well, James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are the pullaways. Well, the takeaways from this. So let's focus on them. So no matter what, it's always like, to me, it's always a studio thing of, well, these are the high profiles, and if we go and take a risk and focus on Cyclops, we risk losing the audience. So I think that's what's been the main issue in all of it.
And even so, moving forward, they still went back to Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
Time and again. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a way, though, that, like, okay, I'm trying to just look at the Marvel formula that they've done. And I know it's like the timeline is not as slow as it was when they did the Avengers, like, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor. But let's just say they pick who they want to be as their, like, 6 central X-Men people, which is hard because I guess Xavier is supposed to be older than all the young mutants that he's leading. But let's just say they go for a storyline where, like, the X-Men are going to be like this established team where they're going forward. Is there a way where they can do it as a TV show or movie where they actually get time to do individually with each character? So you know what I mean? So we can kind of build that rapport with each character. So when they come together, I'm not like, oh, he's getting no screen time. Like, for me, there was no argument for me if Cap didn't get as much screen time in the Avengers, even though he did, over Iron Man, I wasn't arguing about that because I was already invested in the character. Whereas I think when they had Ty Sheridan in these movies, it was kind of like, well, do we even know who you are? Like, only because you're putting a thing over your face doesn't mean that makes you Cyclops.
Before, I would have thought a TV show wouldn't be able to do it because, not everyone's watching the shows. But then they touched on Kang in Loki. So it's like a whole nother world again to be able to do that. In regards to which character, I don't know, Ray. Who would, like, Cyclops? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I just feel like Jean Grey should be left alone for a little while. I know you need her in the X-Men, but I mean, there's so much been done with it. Like, okay, so with Tom Holland, I know we're talking about this note for a while. When we get Tom Holland in Civil War, there's a reason that Marvel didn't put his whole backstory of getting bitten by the spider, blah, blah, because they're assuming that most fans of these movies have watched these movies before. So with X-Men, are they assuming that most people have seen these other X-Men movies and know the backstory of, like, some of the characters they've done over and over again?
My belief is, I reckon they should bring, okay, this is controversial. I actually think they should bring Hugh Jackman, Michael Fassbender, James McAvoy back, but then have them for one movie, get rid of them, and then focus on new mutants that they haven't dealt with. Not the new mutants, new mutants, like other mutants that they haven't really fully explored, or you don't have to follow the same. Like, we've seen X-Men, we've seen it all. I feel like you can just use the basis that's already been built, and then move on into, like, oh, well, what's it like having mutants around in the world? How do they interact with Marvel? Like, I reckon you can do that, because if it's just, oh, we're recasting Professor Xavier, like even going back to the Suicide Squad, like, imagine if, like, Rick Flag, if they recast him, wouldn't have, like, even though people don't care about the first movie, they still were invested in the character because they remember him from another movie. I feel like you'll be more invested into what's happening rather than restarting entirely and having, like, if you have, I don't know, like, I can't even think of an actor to play Patrick Stewart, but Denzel Washington to play
Professor X.
Charles Xavier. Like, you know, you have to restart and you have to tell the same story all over again. And then it's like, oh, you know,
Well, especially with the multiverse, I guess they're opening themselves up to be able to go like, hey, here's these 3 characters that have come over from Earth such and such that have introduced the portal to mutants, but then all of a sudden they die or something happens to them. And then, I mean, the hard thing is if they do that, if they're going to, are you suggesting they kill them off? Is that what you're saying?
not
Like,
even.
how are you going to kill off Magneto? That's a pretty big, I mean, unless there's a Magneto from another universe that becomes Magneto, which is possible, I guess.
Well, maybe not even kill them off, but maybe just, I don't know, just do something. Maybe if it is multiversal, like maybe they go into like they come from their universe here, and like you don't even necessarily need to bring Magneto back. Because I feel like his arc is sort of done. Like I feel like if you bring back someone who's been from like the Nazi era of the Jewish Holocaust, like it's very hard to do that now at this point of time, especially. Well, he's got most war veterans would be in their 90s or something along those lines. So you can just bring in, I don't know, you can do like a time sort of thing where, come from Dark Phoenix and have like, you know, James McAvoy and have Michael Fassbender and explain it in a way, but then at the end it's like they go back to their own universe and it's like, oh wow, well mutants must exist in our universe, let's go find them, sort of thing.
Right, okay.
So you acknowledge what's already happened.
Well,
then,
that question will remain for what they do with the next Black Panther. Like, what are they going to do? Like, are they going to kill off T'Challa, or have they got something else planned? Who knows? But like they did it with Steve Rogers. Like, he's not technically dead. Like, they've done something along those lines.
Well, it's because they want to leave themselves open to the fact that if Chris Evans randomly decided, you know, I now want to come back into the MCU, because I feel like it's interesting again and stuff like that. They haven't killed him, so they've left them open to doing some sort of like prequel. That they could do a Nomad TV show. They could do a whole bunch of stuff with Steve Rogers if they wanted to. And that's just, I guess that's just smart writing, where they don't kill him off. They just like, so if David's thing was to come to pass where, you know, I mean, I don't think they're going to do it like this, but at the end of Far From Home or Doctor Strange, Multiverse of the Madness, whatever, where if there's a post-credit scene and we see those people come through a portal or something like that and they're from a different multiverse, I know if there's a scene in a movie like that, they've left that open to potentially bringing them Hugh Jackman and stuff back at some point if they wanted to, because he's not dead. But we now know there's mutants in our timeline.
Yeah.
So anyway, it'd be interesting. So
I actually would be somewhat interested in what he suggested in regards to using like Magneto and Professor X or like Hugh Jackman, like those big names to introduce like some new mutants. Heck, maybe you could even use the new mutants from that masterpiece of a movie, because we found out that Marvel is capable of getting. Oh well, there is like, for example, with Suicide Squad, putting James Gunn on, you can bring a crappy movie out of the garbage with just the right direction and the right creative movements.
I mean, especially with that girl that plays, well, I forget her actress's name, the one with the sock puppet in the New Mutants.
The blonde.
She obviously got really big from Queen's Gambit after that movie like was filmed and stuff. So as in names like that are names that could really carry the next couple of years of Marvel's mutants even forward if they wanted to.
Yeah. I think she was in Split. Yeah. Oh yeah, and she was with McAvoy.
Yeah.
I'll just leave on this point. With I personally have the opinion you shouldn't bring Tony Stark back, because I feel like that arc is done.
Yeah.
And even though like they finished Wolverine so well, I still feel like you can explore what it would be like for Wolverine to be in the Marvel universe in sort of like that, not a cameo, but an extended cameo in a film. And that's it. Like for me, we've said it, I don't feel recasting Wolverine. Either you leave the character alone or you bring Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine, because I just can't see anyone else taking on that role in the same way, which we'll get into. But yeah.
No, I agree, because it's a whole different universe, really. And within the MCU, Tony Stark is like it's a done. I feel like it's a storyline you can put to rest, like, which is like a quote in the bloody movie. All right, so we'll we'll continue on our X-Men 1 discussion. I mean, it is casual discussions. We can go anywhere. The next segment is, I called it, which is a quote from Fantastic Four.
Allow me to begin your lesson.
Richard says it to Dr. Doom.
Chemistry
Dr. Doom says it back as
101.
well. Time for your lesson. X-Men 101. So just a fun fact about the movie. Some random trivia. Actually, I'll go first because I don't think mine's the most exciting. But apparently, this film, this specific X-Men film, is actually mostly an original story, whereas the other ones were loosely based on, I guess, certain comic book storylines, which is really interesting to me because I thought actually it was really good. If you ask me, like the direction they went with it. There were similarities, I will say, in regards to the political and social commentary, but they weren't specifically X-Men related, following storyline. I know they were used in the newer animations in regards to like mutant registration and stuff. But yeah, I thought it was just super interesting that this movie like holds up pretty well, and it's mostly original story. Like there are comic book elements within the movie, but in regards to the main storyline, it's something new, which is cool to see. So that was my fun fact.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah,
X-Men.
Because I mean, I guess I would have thought that. I mean, it's a different era of comic book movies, but I guess I would have thought that for the first, because I mean, how many comic book movies beside from the Marvel universe came before this?
I don't think. Yeah, just Blade, but it did not pick up the same, and it was mostly DC.
That's what I mean. So I was saying, I imagine that the normal would have been to go off a comic book storyline as the source material. So it's interesting that they kind of took the characters and they kind of did what Marvel do now, as in like Marvel will take comic book storylines, but they really take it and kind of go, how would this, we'll make it our own. How does this work? Take that character, take this character, mesh them together.
I'd say Marvel found a better balance in regards to using comic book, but also allowing it to fit into their universe.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I would actually be really interested to see, because you know how Marvel are like notoriously known for now taking, especially villains or side characters. Like we saw it with Flag Smasher and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, characters like that are something in the comic books, Taskmaster, and then they make that something else in the movies or TV shows. It feels like the fans of X-Men that I know of and am friends of from like the comic books, like diehard X-Men fans, they're so strong about like the character, if that makes sense. Like as in like specifically that this character was this in the comics and it was a female or male, or they were, this sort of sexuality or whatever it may be. They're very specific on it. They're just really specific about it. So it's kind of like, if Marvel was to do that with X-Men, where they go, okay, we're going to take this villain or this side character, because there's so many mutants, so they could take this mutant and kind of make them into like a variation of the one character. And I'm just really interested to see how diehard fans take that, because they're like not diehard fans, diehard the movie, but diehard fans, diehard Marvel. If they take that and they kind of like, get really frustrated and aggressive about it. So yeah. Anyway,
that's funny. Like, we're going a bit of a few segues, but still, it's good stuff. I find like the idea of a comic book movie, like when people say, "Oh, it's supposed to be a comic book movie," but like even the X-Men, like I went and read what the story that X-Men 2 is based on. I'm going to confuse this. It's, I think, God Loves, Man Kills, and it's a commentary on, sort of like McCarthyism mixed with the extreme evangelism of the time, and where and how the politics and the religious hysteria kind of become combined. And I was like, wow, this is very deep. And like if you read a lot of, even like Civil War, like a lot of times comics really go into very deep political issues. So it's funny that when we say, oh, it's a comic book movie, it's like, oh, it's supposed to be fun, very lighthearted, very out of this world. But a lot of comics do go into those realms of, let's make a bit of this a commentary on society. So yeah.
And X-Men is definitely one where that stands out a lot more. Actually, no, that's a big assumption to make. maybe during these times when it came out, it was one that stood out more.
Yeah, I think if you look at all the X-Men movies that have come out, including this, like these ones, then the later ones, they're very political. And maybe the later ones aren't very political, is in maybe the politics that were happening when it came out, but they're obviously politics that were happening when they were set. So in the 70s and in the Cold War and all that kind of stuff. So it is very politically based and driven. And I imagine, I haven't read a lot of the comics. Maybe David's read more, but like from what you're saying, there's a lot of that is in the comics, like out of. But I mean, that's probably like most comics. Like a lot of comics were written just like Captain America was first made, was for a political reason, propaganda. So it's kind of like, you know, when we get down to it, these comics and these source materials are coming out of a way for governments and agendas and people to get certain messages across to kids and people that like comics. So,
well, even the end plot, like on face level, the idea of Magneto converting everyone into being a mutant is a bit like the big machine. It's a bit, this is very early 2000s, very out there. But Bryan Singer, the director at the time, basically said, this was based on, I think, one of the emperors, Constantine, pushed Christianity to become the main religion of Rome. He wanted to make sure everyone was to become Christians, so therefore there wouldn't be disunity in society, so on. So it's a similar thing of like Magneto being like, well, if everyone's a mutant, then that solves the problem. We don't have to do extinction on either ends. So, which I like, because like, a lot of, like, we're used to the ending of, there has to be the big CGI battle, or there's got to be the city destroyed. And I like that, the end plot it's big, but it still has nuance to it, which I felt this film brought.
Just a bit of a side comment. Isn't it funny how now, because like maybe back then, like to affect, like the machine was only meant to turn New York City into mutants. It's funny how now you have movies that it's like the whole world, and now it just goes beyond that. It's like the whole universe. Like the escalation we've gotten to. Like what's next? Oh well, even you go even different time periods now. Like
yeah, I mean, if you watch the ending of Loki and then the impact that would have on the whole globe universe creation in comparison to the end of this movie, it's kind of like, it's basically 9/11. Like that's like, I mean, I don't mean that in an offensive way. I mean, it's only affecting that one city.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is like that. It's like a terrorist attack. It would affect the one city. Then obviously it would affect the hysteria around the world. But which is interesting to see how the X-Men play into the MCU, because you've got characters now that aren't Magneto that's trying to just have one agenda of like, making mutants be powerful and stuff like that. You've got villains that literally are snapping their fingers and people are dying without actually even knowing what's going on. So it'll be interesting to see where the villains and the characters in the X-Men fit in going forward.
Well, people make arguments. They're like, why have the X-Men been this entire time? But when you think about it, the whole aim of the X-Men is preservation. They're thinking, look, we're trying people aren't accepting people who are born with these genetics who possibly be threats in society. And the fact that we can't pick up who they are makes it even more of a threat. So we're trying to protect these people. And if we expose them to the world as superheroes, they're going to come under even more scrutiny. So, because the X-Men are a completely different kettle of fish to the Avengers. So there are reasons, like the X-Men have very different goals compared to other superheroes in the MCU.
Would you go as far to say that they're uncanny?
Oh, the title of the next
anyway, do you want me to do a fun fact? I've got like one, but that's probably about it.
Yeah, I was gonna go to you next.
I mean, this whole section is basically written for David's deep dives.
Yep.
I've got a few more.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I've only got like one or two. Maybe David has these as well. I kind of just looked them up. I didn't really know these or not before. Apparently, our boy that we love and has made our lives just the most incredible place to live because we get to talk about Marvel movies, Kevin Feige. Apparently, he filmed a cameo for this movie originally because he was on as one of the original producers, but then wasn't able to do it. And he filmed the scene when Wolverine's having the dream and he's in the what do you call it, the Weapon X weapon, whatever it's called, the lab or whatever.
Yeah.
Supposedly, I think it's from this movie. It could be from number 2, but I'm pretty sure it said it was from this movie. Apparently he filmed and he was just one of the people that was like the technician and stuff like that inside of it. Like obviously you don't see his face, but he was in that scene.
I think you get glimpses of it, like really short glimpses of it in this one, whereas in the second one, obviously you're there, but like you get more of it.
So
but you do get some of it in this one.
Apparently, the other thing too, in relation to another MCU tie-in, was the line that we just spoke about before.
Do you know what
the
happens
lightning.
to a
What
toe
happens
struck
when a
by
toe gets struck by
lightning?
lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else. Apparently, Josh Whedon was the one that wrote that line.
Oh my
Learned
gosh!
so much.
In the initial
Same
writing,
thing
but
happens
in
to
saying that,
everything
he
else.
also was the one who wrote the line when Wolverine is trying to prove to Cyclops that he's not Mystique, and he says, "You're a dick." He also wrote that line, so he kind of saves himself a little bit. He kind of makes up for the terrible line that he wrote, because that's kind of a pretty cool, iconic line.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, and apparently also, I don't know if this is one of 50s too, but anyway, apparently, you know how we get the iconic Hugh Jackman bub, like the line bub that he brings in.
Yeah.
Obviously, he really wanted to bring that in to the character because of its, backstory with the comics and stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in the script. So when they were recording it, he just threw it in every single time until eventually it got in there and then became this, like...
I think that was the same with his fear of flying.
Yeah.
Like it was just something. It wasn't a comic. That wasn't a comic book thing though. Bub was, but like Hugh Jackman did a lot of ad lib in a sense.
Anyway, that's mine. Over to you, Fitzy. Deep dive
I got
away.
a fun fact, and it's just going to tie in, and because I thought it was just me, but I actually think this is a thing. When did you guys all realize that a Wolverine was a real animal?
Yeah. I always thought it was a wolf because
Exactly.
because in number 2 he makes eye contact with that wolf.
Yeah.
Looking it up.
But even the other day I was talking.
It's a weird animal. It's
I think
a very
I looked it
weird
up
animal.
in like year 12.
It was late for me too. Yeah, very late.
Yeah, because I always believed it was a fun play on the word wolf, and that he was supposed to be that. And I eventually realized it was a real animal, and it's still people to this day like, wait, Wolverine's a real animal? And even Hugh Jackman, and this is the fun thing about it, he thought he was playing a wolf, and apparently he studied them, and he was like, he wanted to get their thing going, like with their snouts and the like that. So like when he was actually playing, he was trying to actually act like what a wolf would act like, and the directors pulled him aside and said, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm watching." They're like, "No, you're not. That's not what." So I think it's a common thing.
That actually makes so much sense, like because the comparison between his Wolverine and comic Wolverine, and then the comparison between the animals. And like, thankfully, he pulled it off really well. Like for us to embrace another type of Wolverine that was more associated with a wolf.
But the thing is, like, even in the comics now, like, there's some comics where he's running with the wolves, and like, for a character supposed to be a Wolverine, he's very associated with wolves.
Thank you, Hugh Jackman, for the wrong animal.
Other fun fact is Tyler Mane, the actor that played Sabretooth, was actually supposed to play Thor in an early version.
Thank God he didn't.
I think Sam Raimi, the director of Spider-Man, was actually going to direct Thor with Tyler Mane. I'm pretty sure that's the link up.
Wow.
One other question I have before we move on. Did you, even though X-Men Origins Wolverine wasn't a great film, did you feel Liv Schreiber, the guy that played Sabretooth in that movie, was a good Sabretooth? And
actually, me and James would talk
we
about
actually
this.
spoke about it before you came on.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
And
I'd talk about it then.
As bad as that movie is, I feel like, him and Hugh Jackman did their roles quite well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the most engaging Sabretooth or engaging character in general, but if there were any like somewhat positive aspects of that movie, I liked his Sabretooth. Like,
I feel like he was, because he was threatening. I love it when he like grabs Will.i.am's spine. He's like, I can feel your spine, Johnny boy. That's funny. I didn't know you had one. And I'm like, like they cast Tyler Mane because he's big and he's intimidating, but you love the actors that are just intimidating through how they speak, and it's like,
I think every time he was on screen, what's his name, Liv Schreiber?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Like when he was there, you thought like someone was about to die, sort of thing.
Yeah.
He had that presence about him, which I think is good. On a side note, really quickly, I know people that are listening to this can't see what I'm about to share with these guys, but maybe we can upload it to the Casual Discussions page after this movie. But this is the guy that I would have preferred to play Wolverine. I actually got a photo with him when I was real young, so I'll just share it with you real quick. It's a classic photo. It'll be worth the wait. No, it's not Natalie Portman. I wouldn't bother sharing a photo of Natalie Portman. There we go. just a real classic Wolverine. You know what I mean?
Oh no!
Yellow spandex.
look how weathered his suit is. Why is it? It's like pea yellow. It's not even real yellow.
Wolverine is not the only problem in this.
Wait, is that girl supposed to be Storm, but she's not African American?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 'cause she's got the X-Men. That photo was taken at what was it called? Wonderland in Sydney, the old theme park. Is that
Australia's Wonderland?
Yeah.
In Sydney.
Nice.
That was the third last day it was open before it shut down. Actually.
Hey, you got a good lineup. You got Captain America, Elektra, Spider-Man, Daredevil, Wolverine.
Why does Elektra look like she's dressed as the monkey from Jungle Book that does the little the ones that does it is wearing like one of those little fez hats?
Oh, what the heck?
Anyway, we can get rid of that. If you can have that photo, I'll give it to you later if you want to upload it on Casual Discussions. But I mean, look, do they purposely made Daredevil also look like he's blind? Is that obviously supposed to be on purpose?
Is Spider-Man holding your hand?
Yeah, you wouldn't get away with that now. And I'm glad that both of his hands are in view because one of them could have been somewhere they weren't supposed to be. So thankfully, legally, we can show this photo. So it's good.
It's like you wanted to get out of the photo. It's like, no, we're taking this photo.
This was very close to the reason why Wonderland shut down.
There we go. We're done.
Can you make
right.
Can you make me host again, just in case the recording?
Oh, okay. How do I do this?
Go to participants and then more.
Oh, next to you. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And then
you're the host. It's all right.
Make host.
You're good, man. You're good.
Cheers.
You're good.
Just in case the recording stuff's up. Also, I like to be in control. No, kidding. All right. All right. So, actually, I was really excited for that segment. The X-Men 101. All right. The next one, just a bit of a Q&A. Just random questions we have regarding this movie, whether it was plot or just anything at all.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
So I think start off with Chance. What was your question in regards to something about this movie?
The way I approached this question was more if I was to sit down with Bryan Singer, what are the sort of questions I would ask him to kind of find out answers as to why he did what he did. The first one we kind of talked about a lot, but was why Hugh Jackman. Like I would be really interested to know based off what he'd done before this movie. Obviously, it's a great choice. Like, obviously, nobody would regret it. But what about Hugh Jackman made him go, yeah, he's the guy? And also kind of like asking Bryan Singer, do you think that Hugh Jackman was kind of show up everyone else in this movie to the level that he did? Because realistically, this movie became about Hugh Jackman, like in a way. Like it was like, you know, everyone, I mean, you appreciated Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, but everybody already knew they liked them. You know, if you watched cinema before this and went into it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, these guys are good. But I kind of would have gone like, why Hugh Jackman? Like, what about Hugh Jackman? And why is that the direction that you wanted to go in? And then on that same line, I would have gone, why Rogue? Like out of any of the characters of X-Men you could have picked, like when we watch the cartoon, if they just went strictly off the cartoon, we get a lot more obviously of Jubilee. And that's kind of like that. She's the Rogue of that cartoon TV show. That's kind of like that young, new X-Men.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously it fits the plot line because Magneto wanted to use her to get, you know, the powers and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, you could have written a different story. Her powers and Rogue's powers aren't all that incredible to me. Like I don't think they're like, you know, they're interesting, I guess, but they're not like.
That's not like in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, in the shows, obviously, the cartoon, she's pretty cool too. But it's just not, to me, it's just not like it's not like she's like this amazing. Okay, so if they'd started out with a young Jean Grey, right, and Jean Grey was like this incredibly powerful mutant as a young kid, and she was the one that got taken. Like if that was the storyline, that's something that I would do. I mean, I'm not saying that they should have done that because the movie's still pretty good, but that would be my why. And then the last one, just for a bit of fun, is why did they not use the original theme song from the cartoon just continuously through the whole show? There's actually parts of the movie where I heard it when I watched it this morning, and I was like, oh, they actually sound. It did sound similar to. Yeah, it sounds similar at the end and the start of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, they're my questions. Oh, and maybe also too, why did they choose to start the movie with that kind of like the narration by Patrick Stewart with the kind of Cerebro sequence, because that really becomes synonymous with X-Men as you go along. But maybe what were the choices behind doing that? Because really that's like, you know, not something that's they could have done something completely different, but why did they choose to do that?
His voice.
Anyway,
it just comes down to his voice.
that's probably true. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Could have been a 2000s thing. I mean, in regards to just Hugh Jackman and Rogue, maybe I don't know exactly why, but I feel like it was to do with the whole original storyline direction that they were going for. Just for something new in regards to the X-Men storyline. I don't really know Bryan Singer's vision, so I can't comment too much on it. But yeah, maybe they
I think because I think if you sometimes with these characters they can all seem the same. I keep referencing Suicide Squad, but there's a joke about that with Peacemaker when he comes out and they explain Peacemaker's role, and Bloodsport's like, what? So he has exactly the same thing as me. So
yeah.
I think what they were trying to do is like with Rogue, they were trying to explore the idea of, so she's a teenager, she's learning learning more about moving into her next stage of development and so on, and she can't have an intimacy with her boyfriend because she can't, because it would affect him. And I think they were trying to make a commentary on that, on how difficult it would be. I don't know. I think it was a sort of like isolation in such a vulnerable time in your life. And I think that's what they were exploring in that. And with Wolverine, it was more the idea of, someone more at the end stages of their life and how their abilities was making them more jaded. So I think it was more they were reflecting the mutant powers, reflecting their personalities and the stages of life they each were in. So I think that was more what they were going.
That's a deep dive. That's a straight up deep dive. That's great. That was
not
fantastic.
Even a dive into a pool. That's a dive into a tsunami.
That was great commentary. Just a quick question on Rogue. Obviously in the opening scene, which we spoke about with her in her house, is that his parents or her parents?
Her parents.
Her parents. Oh, okay.
I swear it's his parents.
Oh, is it?
I don't know. It's just because if it's her parents, okay, it makes sense. She's run away after that. But if it's his parents, is she homeless? Does she have family? Like, she just kind of like kisses her boyfriend and then leaves. And it's kind of like, we don't get any do the parents, I have a lot of questions for Charles Xavier as to what he does with his process for getting random mutants. Does he call the parents? Like if Rogue rocks up and Rogue's at his house and he's there with Wolverine, and then Wolverine's obviously not her dad, and Wolverine's like some psycho that stabs her in the stomach. There's got to be some paperwork. Is there child safe incidents? Are there things that need to get written up? Look,
this was 2000. Things with the paperwork wasn't as much of a thing.
But surely he's getting on the phone to Rogue's parents and being like, "Hey, yeah, we have your daughter. She's fine." Like he has to. Surely there's processes. Otherwise, he's kidnapping children. Let's be real about it.
Yeah. No, I feel like there is a process. Maybe he talks to docs or something. But the whole thing about him rocking up in someone's house and they're like, what are you doing in my house? It's like, well, he's in a wheelchair, so he'd be like, because I don't know, it's like, well, we can't beat up a guy in a wheelchair.
If you're suggesting that if someone turns up to your house randomly in a wheelchair, it's all fine? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Well,
come on in, man. Have a cup of coffee. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Can we get a Disney Plus TV show about Charles Xavier contacting docs? No, she's visiting homes and contacting docs about people. Hey, yep, another one. We got another child here. Like, we need to deal with this.
Well, they always seem to portray in the movies that the parents want to get rid of the kids. You see in X-Men 2, Iceman rocks up to his parents' house and then they sell him out in the first 10 minutes. It's like
seems to be the case. I feel like the front of it being a school, just a school for the gifted, is how he is able to justify.
It's a military camp. No one, who's there besides mutants? There's never anyone. There's no orientation. There's no parent-teacher interviews. It's like you go there and you just never find out what happened to them.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Thunderbirds, the TV show Thunderbirds, and it's like, how does no one know that this isn't the Thunderbirds base? It's just this massive complex.
When you think about
supposedly hidden.
We criticize the Red Room and Black Widow, but when you look at this, Professor X is like, oh, we're a school. We accept all types of people. And underground, we have a spaceship and we're training them to fight the evils of this world. It's like, oh my God.
I feel like that's an ongoing question.
That's why I love that's why I really enjoy X-Men First Class, because it has a bunch of mutants there that really, it's like, if you got them into battle, what are they doing? Because the whole point of this movie is supposed to be you are training them to fight and stuff. And then you get like Banshee in X-Men First Class, and it's like, if you come up against guys with guns, what are you gonna do? How is that gonna help you? Like, you're just gonna die. Like, I don't understand how that helps you.
Like, there is the argument that like, oh, there's only a certain select that go and fight, and they're age appropriate and so on. But then, like, Rogue? I don't know. I don't remember how it all works, but it just seems like at some point, like when you graduate, or maybe when you're in your last year, you're gonna have to go and fight. Like, it's like part of the curriculum. It's like, you know,
it's like growing up in Korea. Once you reach a certain age, you have to join the army.
You guys remember that? Another just segue. You remember the movie Agent Cody Banks?
yeah.
Oh yeah, great movie.
He tries to get in, like, this school with Hilary Duff in it, and then the agent lady comes in to convince his parents.
Oh yeah.
So that's what Charles is doing.
Yeah, right. Can we review Agent Cody Banks next time?
Agent Cody Banks too.
All right, David, what was your question for the group? Or even the chat? Or do you just know everything about this movie?
I do know too much about this movie. Okay, my first question wouldn't be so much, I think it's just a question to life itself, is because originally, I don't know if you know this actor, but I'm actually going to watch a movie with him tonight called Mission Impossible 2. But the actor's name is Dougray Scott. He's currently in the Batwoman show. He's not really a known actor now, but he was starting to come up in the 2000s, and he was a Scottish actor. And he wasn't actually able to do this film because of Mission Impossible 2. And like, my question would be is, like, can you imagine you got so close to a role, and then you're like, nah, I'm going to go play a villain in another film that is arguably not the most favorite of the Mission Impossible series, and now is just, more of a TV actor. Imagine if you look back and I think, I could have been Hugh Jackman. I could have been that level of fame. And like, you read these sort of stories of these guys that, oh yeah, I was going to play this role, but I passed on it, and ended up being like one of the biggest roles. So I don't know. I think that's my question. It's like a what if of what that would have been like.
I mean, it's similar to Terrence Howard, yet
exactly.
Yet different at the same time, because
I think it's Terrence Howard. I feel like Terrence Howard is arrogant enough to be like, well, if I'm not the main player, like, he probably looks at it and thinks, well, Don Cheadle's not the main guy. So, yeah. It sounds like he wanted to be the main character, but...
Yeah.
I guess another question...
He wanted to be the main character in an Iron Man movie where he wasn't Iron Man. Is that what he wanted?
Yeah, because apparently So originally Iron Man was... like, people weren't supposed to care about Robert Downey Jr. because I thought, oh, he's the black sheep. But people love Terrence Howard. So... I think it was more like, even though he was a side character, people were going to come and watch it for him. So when the next movie came, they're like, we're going to cut your pay. Robert Downey Jr. is the main guy now. He's like, well, I don't want this. And he's like, see ya. That's how it sounds like.
I'm sure there are heaps of actors that have had that moment where they turned down something for something else that could have been so much bigger though.
Yeah. I guess another question is, was Halle Berry supposed to have a bigger role in this movie? Because... like, when you think about it, like, I don't know. I swear she was pretty big at this time. I don't know if, like, she was just up and coming, or... because she did win the Academy Award a few years later. But, yeah, like, she just... like, Storm is so sidelined in this film. And, like, the only thing we do remember her from is that line, which is, like, the worst line in the film. So...
what did you guys think of her portrayal? Did you think it was good? I know it was limited, but in that limited amount, did you...
Well,
she to me, she kind of takes on that like caring figure, like the mother. She's much more caring and mothering than what Jean Grey is. I mean, maybe it's just because she has that scene with Senator Kelly where she's there when he dies, sort of thing. Which I don't think was bad, but I mean, obviously when I watched it this morning, I was like, yeah, she wasn't amazing and she didn't have a lot of screen time. But for me, I always think back to X-Men and I always think like, oh man, they had Halle Berry. That's like actually quite a big pull. Like, it's one of the things I always think about, that she was a big actress for them to get. Whereas like, was she really? Like, I agree with you, David. I'm like, was she really? Like, I don't understand why she was not in this. Was she purely in there for people to like, I don't mean to say it in a sexist way, but for guys to be like, oh, we love Halle Berry. Like, she's great.
Well, like even to the point where in the comics it's like, oh yeah, she's like this, she's from Africa and so on. I was like, wait, and I went back to watch it, and it's like, yeah, I guess her accent is like African, but it's, I don't know. I always maybe it's like just how I think about it, but I always imagine her just having like a Halle Berry accent, not so much like a Black Panther Wakandan type accent sort of thing.
I mean, on Chance's comment, it wasn't beyond, like he had to say it, but it wasn't beyond directors to do that, to just use them to just, I guess, appeal to people, like,
yeah,
to attract people. Essentially,
well, when you think about it, like Rebecca Romagen, who plays Mystique, even Famke Janssen, I think I'm pretty sure Famke is an ex-model or something. Like they're sort of not like they're great. You know, Famke is a fantastic actress, but they were the sort of actress they would use as like, yeah, eye candy for the screen at the time.
But her Jean Grey was pretty strong in her portrayal in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I actually preferred her to Sophie Turner, but anyway. I guess one other question I would have, and we'll move on from here, is the fact that I feel like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine's success in this made the X-Men about Wolverine. And I guess my question is, again, what if Hugh Jackman didn't become big in Wolverine? Because like I said, Cyclops gets sidelined, all the others get sidelined. It's Wolverine's story, and it's like, maybe did that limit the X-Men? Did that limit its potential? Like, what if, you know, rather than the next one being about X-Men, about Wolverine, they went off and did the Wolverine films and explored all that in the Wolverine films, and they kept the X-Men about the X-Men. Would that look different? I don't know. So
yeah, would they have done more with the others? I mean, it's almost like, it's weird to think like Magneto's line in this movie in regards to, not this one, in I think X-Men 2 or third one, where he's like, it's not always about you, but ironically, a lot of
no, so this one,
he
when
gets a lot of attention.
He's in the train and he's like, "Oh, I'm the one you want." He's like,
yeah, it's
"Oh, my dear boy, who said it was about you?" And then it's
actually, I like that they keep playing on that. Yeah, in the other movies.
Yeah, I think that if we didn't get, like, if he didn't take off as such a strong character, and I mean, I get it, the markability for someone like that is so strong. Like, you know, Rosita did it before with the pens and stuff in between your fingers. Like, we used to do that at school all the time. Like, you know, the markability is quite strong in comparison to, you know, Professor X. Like, what are you gonna do? Shave your head? Like, is in like, there's not really much you can do.
Yes.
Yeah, true. But if they didn't have that, I think later we would have got more films. Like, there was obviously that proposed Magneto sort of origins film they were going to make about Magneto, which they didn't choose to do because they made First Class instead, and obviously went in that direction with all of them. But I think we would have had more branch off movies, because you got to think they obviously had the money and the budget, and Fox wanted to make movies. So if you didn't get Wolverine Origins, if you didn't get the Wolverine, if you didn't get Logan, they would have filled them with 3 other movies. That's just the reality of how studios work.
Yeah, but like, coming back to Cyclops, even though questions about James Marsden, like, his suit looks better in the comics. In the comics, there's constant conflict between him and Charles Xavier because, like you said, he's the straight ace, but Charles Xavier is making these questionable decisions, and he's constantly like, why are you doing this? You know, I'm trying to lead these people, but it's getting to the point I'm leading them against you. Like, there's nuance in that, which in this film is just, okay, you're going to have laser eyes and you're going to be the rival to Wolverine and Jean Grey. Even though Wolverine's playing on his girlfriend, it's like, oh no, Cyclops is the bad guy because he wants to keep his girlfriend. So again, like, yeah, we don't like Cyclops in this movie, but that character has potential. It's just, again, it's like, well, this is Wolverine's show, so everyone else kind of ends up coming off short.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a bit of a what if.
Yeah, which we'll find out next week on Disney Plus.
Imagine that. Imagine episode 1 is like, what if Wolverine never became popular? So I feel like it'd be David's favorite show. He'd be like, yes.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
Do you have any questions? Did you have any questions? Did you say yours?
Yeah. No, I haven't said it yet.
Okay.
It's not much of a why, and I don't want to spend too long on it, but do you guys think the Sokovia Accords or this Mutant Registration Act was done better?
Sokovia Accords.
Right.
Yeah, I think the Sokovia Accords, because it stretches through the movies, it ties in really well. the characters, I think, for someone like Thaddeus Ross and all that sort of stuff are quite stronger in comparison to some of the characters in this movie. But also, I think the Registration Act, I think, has more. It seems like the control issue for mutants, because obviously the Sokovia Accords is in relation to heroes that are already known, like they're known heroes, if that makes sense. Like the public know who Iron Man is, they know who, like they may not know I guess most of their identities are known anyway. But in X-Men, they're asking them to reveal themselves when they're actually hidden, and it's actually from a control point of view. I think that carries some weight, where you're making people come out of the darkness or hiding to show the world, which actually brings a lot of fear around it. It's interesting in this time that we're going through with COVID, like with what's happening at the moment. Whether that, to watch that now, I actually thought of some stuff like that when I was watching it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, yeah.
It relates heaps into the third one, because there's even a vaccine.
But I feel like it's a good concept. Like the concept looks better. It sounds better than Sokovia Accords. It's just it gets sidelined pretty quick after the first scene. They do a very good job with it, but then Senator Kelly dies. It just all gets pretty sidelined with it. Like whenever I think about the mutant registration, the first thing I think about is Senator Kelly turning into water. Like, whoa!
I think because we thought at a point the Sokovia Accords were kind of forgotten about for a bit in the MCU, which is fair enough, because it was leading into Thanos and whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just the thing with these movies. Both these Marvel films, like these franchises, they kind of do get sidelined a little bit. But yeah, I do agree the Sokovia Accords was done better. But that's probably because
the prequels make it hard as well, because like so much happens in like all the other ones, and you got Senator Kelly being like, apparently there's people that walk through walls, even though there's footage of actual mutants in massive world catastrophes in the 60s and the 70s, but all I know about is this person that walks through walls. Like,
yeah, but I think
the prequel stuff a little bit, like, as in they tried to fix a lot of that. And I mean, at the end of Days of Future Past, they did fix some stuff that we had problems with. And then they made Apocalypse, and it just opened up even more. It's just like they didn't it's like they couldn't decide. Yeah, anyway, but I agree with you. It does create some problems when you go back and watch these movies where you're kind of like, that doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. Also, the MCU is a lot more well established in comparison to this franchise, so it makes sense that it's worked better there, and it's kind of good that in these shows and whatnot they've kind of continued on referring to those accords and whatnot. Okay, the final segment. As we do in our usual casual discussions, just our Tobey Maguire rating. What do you guys rate this movie?
Now dig on this.
How many Tobeys out of 10 Maguires? I'll kick it off. I'll give it a 7. 7 Tobeys out of 10 Maguires. Again, rewatchability is quite easy for me to do. It's a classic, if anything. Like, this movie is a classic, and I think it was a good first step for superhero movies, specifically Marvel stuff, towards what they have now in the MCU. I think they're still working out the kinks, obviously, and getting the balance right. But yeah, that's my thoughts. 7 Tobeys out of 10 Maguires. David, your Tobey Maguire rating?
Yeah, I'll give it 7.5 Tobeys out of Maguires. A lot of people say that, this was a time where superhero movies were ashamed to be superhero movies, but I feel like, this was a time where they're trying to see how superhero movies fit into the movie world. And like starting off a movie with, Nazi Germany, which like shocked me as a kid. And then the next scene being this kid, choking because he'd, he got the life drained out of him. And then the next scene having this amazing to and fro between Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, from like these 2 Shakespearean actors with this fantastic dialogue. Like, there's a lot to this film, and we had the MCU how it is today, not just for its comic book roots, but also for bringing in great actors and be able to elevate the material. So yeah.
And finally, Chance.
Yeah, I think I do really like this movie. As I've stated, and we'll get to maybe when we talk about it later, X2 is definitely, like I said to the boys in our chat, X2 would probably make it into my top 5 MCU movies. Like I really hold that movie very highly. But for this movie, I think I'll probably give it like a 7.8 out of no, you know what, 7.8 Hugh out of Jackman's Wolverine.
Will
No,
you help me out with
7.8.
you, Jack, on the elephant or something?
So no, 7.8 Toby's out of Maguire. I think it just doesn't do enough for me to make it into that 8 above echelon. I think if some of the side characters were a little bit more developed, like Sabretooth, like Toad, like stuff like that, like that's what the MCU does really well. Like, to me, you look at a movie like Ant-Man and you look at their side characters that we've spoken about in casual discussions, they do them so well. Whereas it's a different time of movies. Whereas in this, they were kind of like, oh, no one's really going to care about Sabretooth or Toad. We'll just make them like really basic, really like whatever they do, and nobody will care.
Yeah.
Whereas I think now, like, movies have developed. Like, when you go in a movie now, every time someone's on screen, you want them to be interesting and to be like have some sort of backstory. So,
Do you know Toad is Darth Maul?
Yeah, Ray Parker.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
He's
it's great.
He's if anything, his stunt work was really good.
Sorry?
His stunt work was really good.
Yeah.
This movie, well, as you'd expect.
I mean, he can't do much about it. He can't do much about what happened to himself. When lightning strikes a Toad, it does the same thing it does to everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just
Was that like a? Because, like, you know that joke, what do you call a frog that talks? A talking frog. Is that like?
yeah. It's,
one
I
of those?
guess.
I feel like it's a place line. It's like, oh, well, the actor will make this into a better line when they actually say it. And she was like, I don't have the time. I'm just going to say it for what it is.
Or is it like storm humor or something? Is that what she's like in the comics? I don't know.
I don't know. To me, it sounds like when you're filming it, the actress and actors would have had like a crude joke that would have gone there instead of the actual line, and so they would have found it interesting. But they can't say that in the movie, so when they say it, it's actually like a different line.
It's an inside joke.
Yeah, which I mean is like it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't this like really pivotal moment in the film where, like, you know what I mean, the special effects are really high, she's just come up, and it's like it does really lean towards this big Joss Whedon type line.
Yeah,
but
it
Joss
just doesn't
Whedon,
deliver.
every time he hears that line, just laughs his head off. Oh my gosh, I'm so funny.
it's probably just his own. It's an inside joke with himself.
He's probably thinking about how he can get a better view of Halle Berry from the other side while he's writing it.
Oh my gosh.
All right, well, thank you for joining me today, boys, in this discussion. Good to get another one in, and good to venture to the Marvel outskirts, or the MCU outskirts, which is just Marvel movies in general. It'll be interesting to see where we go with these. I'm going to call them the side mission episodes, where we explore other aspects of Marvel in a sense. I actually enjoyed this. I think the segments are fun. They leave a lot of room for discussion.
I'm keen for Wesley Snipes' Blade.
I'm not sure if I can handle that much techno, but I am down. All right, well, thank you for joining. Shout out to Doug Ray Scott for missed opportunities. Catch you in the next episode.
See you, Doug Ray.
Thanks for watching.
Doug Ray.